Today on WAWTAR, Loren Wilkinson, Dr. Loren Wilkinson from Regent College, philosopher, and a guy with a new book. We get into Neoplatonism, we get into a ton of things. We get into the iconography of his book, and we get into the idea that, hey, if modern people, maybe even Protestants, screwed this up, how do we fix it? Guys, we got events, Chippewa Falls, concert with Joe Pug, Greg Gilbertson. Now, Loren Wilkinson. Tell me again, do you like Dr. Wilkinson? Is that a thing? Dr. Loren?
No, nobody calls me Dr. Wilkinson. Loren is fine.
Let's do it like that then. I'm John, as you know. So here we are. I'm really blessed to have you today on WAWTAR, on our podcast. I feel like for folks who listen out there, I've been chiming away about the old world and the new world, about lessons from the old world, especially the old Christian world that I call orthodoxy. And I've read a lot of cosmology, St. Maximus, but mostly this guy, Philip Sherrard, that I love. And then I found you through a friend who loves our restaurant and listens to the podcast. And then I thought, how do we not have you on, Loren? Because you're writing about cosmos and you're writing about meaning and why there's something and not nothing. And then you're also, I think, would you call yourself a Protestant? So let's start there. How would you categorize your Christian?
I like C.S. Lewis's mere Christianity and mere Christian. I'm not comfortable with Protestant. I think there were things very much worth protesting about in the Protestant Reformation, but what the Reformation was doing was returning to some basic Christian truths, and so I have a lot of sympathy for orthodoxy. You'll also find in reading the book, and actually it's kind of implicit in this carved Celtic cross that a student, former student who was teaching in Lithuania and had a Lithuanian carve this out of oak. But the Celtic knotwork suggests the Celtic connection. I don't think there's any particular Celtic Christianity. They too are simply recovering or didn't lose some of the things that Orthodoxy didn't lose. And a lot of people have pointed out the similarity between some Celtic themes and Orthodoxy, a strong sense of the Trinity, a strong sense of the closeness of God in and through creation, a deep sacramental sense. So I'm not Orthodox in the capital O sense, but I wouldn't be comfortably called Protestant or Catholic either. I'm just Christian.
You're confessing Christ on some level. Yeah. So let's talk about, it's about your book, but let me ask this question. Creation, something like stuff, and stuff is something like not nothing. So I'm starting simple and to ask this question. In all of your writings, there's a strong identity and a love for creation, but what is it? What is it? Is a rock alive in your view? Is it what is creation to you as a writer and a Christian?
I think one of the ways of getting at that is to look at the other words that people use to describe what I use, creation. And the most common one today is nature. The problem with nature is that it has dubious roots. It's comes from a word for a Latin goddess, natura, and it means that which gives birth. Nature really means, it's related to the word natality or native, and it just means that which gives birth. But creation didn't give birth to itself. That's one of the great mysteries, one of the great singularities that I talk about in the book. Why is there something and not nothing? And so I suppose in a way, I mean by creation simply everything that is. We wake every morning to this mystery that we are in a world that we didn't create and couldn't have imagined, and we take it for granted. It's a wonderful phrase, by the way, take it for granted, because it means that it's something that's granted is given. And creation is granted. It's given to us. We take it for granted, which means we usually forget it. But we really should take it as a gift, which it is. Creation, everything that is a gift, and our being aware of it is a gift as well. So I can't say much more than that. I think creation is a much better word than nature, a far better word than environment, which is another word that gets tossed around a lot, the environment, talking about earthly creation. But just call it creation, because that recognizes that it is a gift of a creator.
Do you think the created order, again, the assumptions will be largely Christian, Genesis for us, but we can wander around into other cosmologies if you want, the best we can. I'm not a pro on that stuff, but do you think that creation has a consciousness? Is it aware of itself, or as a human being in creation or a part of, can I fully be aware of myself? Is this possible? Does it have consciousness? Because this is a big topic now on the internet.
Yeah, well, consciousness, like creation, is another big mystery. We don't know the consciousness of anything else. We only encounter consciousness in one place, and that's right here. I know I'm conscious. I kind of assume you are, but I'm not completely positive. I only have signs. I'm much less sure about, I'm sure about my dogs, which I've kept out of the room. They're conscious. The birds that are flying around are conscious. Not so sure about trees. Not so sure about the planet. But the great mystery, the great gift again, is that we are conscious. One of the things the first mystery we wake to is creation. The second mystery is our consciousness of it. And so I kind of leave the question of the consciousness of other creatures unanswered. But as I try to develop in the book, it seems to me that one of the gifts, one of the tasks of human consciousness is to let other things have a voice. If they're not conscious, lift them into our own consciousness and let them have a voice to praise and respond to their creator. So
does that put us in a special category as human beings?
I think it does. I don't think there's anything else that we know of that has this ability to give a voice to other things in the same way that we do. Now, I leave completely unanswered and the question of whether there are other similar intelligent consciousnesses elsewhere in the universe. I think that's a question we have to just leave unanswered. At the moment, there's no sign that the suggestions are we're unique, but we could be surprised any day. It's wonderful either way. If God has seeded consciousnesses throughout the universe, or whether we're the only ones. It's sort of the beginning. I don't know. We'll leave that unanswered.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't flummox me. Whoa, what about aliens? I don't know. It feels like a continuation of the same narrative. Something wasn't, and then something was, and maybe there's an alien that was, and that is. I agree. So you're okay with, it feels like you're okay with a bit of unknowing, quite a bit of unknowing, which I don't know that modernity is that okay with that. I feel like as soon as something's unknown, the whole point is to know it.
Right.
Can we live in in that unknown space okay as Christians?
Oh, I think we have to. And I think one of the big problems with modernity, and I do talk about this quite a bit in the book, is that, well, let me take a step backwards. What I would argue is that the basic human response to this mystery of awaking in a world that's a gift and being conscious of it, the basic response is wonder, is awe. And that's where we all begin. Children have it. Just watch a child learning, just looking at his hand, picking something up and looking at it. But we get old pretty fast, and we become we get used to it. But out of awe, out of that basic response of awe, I argue go the three great trees of human culture. And one is worship, religion, if you will. It's recognizing that it's a gift and that we're in a mystery. Another is art. It's responding with our own creativity to the creativity that's poured out upon us. And the third, and I spend the most time on this, is science. It's trying to figure it out, trying to understand it as much as we can. And science has deep Christian roots. I spend quite a bit of time on that in one chapter of the book. And there are many roots to science, but one of the major ones in the West was, and this surprises many people, was Francis of Assisi, or St. Francis, because he, for Western Christianity, and perhaps this wasn't as necessary in the same way in Eastern Orthodoxy, he recovered a sense of the uniqueness of each thing that was hallowed by the incarnation, but the fact that God had become a creature. And Francis was not a philosopher or not a scientist, but his movement, which grew rapidly and spread all over over Europe, his movement nourished science. So the early Western empirical scientists were nourished by the Franciscans. But I get back to your question: how can we live with wonder? Science rooted in wonder, but fairly quickly it discovered the power of mathematics, and tended to reduce wonder to law and to number. And those are wonderful tools. Tools, as one scientist says, we don't deserve the way mathematics enables us to do science. On the other hand, that's a simplification of what causes wonder. And here I come to an idea that I've been tremendously helped by a British psychiatrist who started out as a literature professor, Ian McGilchrist. Wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary.
He reviewed your book. He is intense. We like him in my house. We like him.
He's been a good friend. He's been in our house. But he's done a lot of work as a psychiatrist on the fact that we essentially, as human beings, have two brains. Physically, we share this with birds and animals. We speak of them as the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. We all use both of them. They're both equally important, but they do different things. They respond to the world in different ways. And one of the ways responding to the world is to simplify it, to make a map of it, to reduce it to numbers. And humans are very good at that because it enables us to use it. Birds and animals do the same thing. Birds have a consciousness that can just pick out a single seed, but they also have a consciousness that's aware of what's going on around them, and that's the essentially the right brain's task is to respond in empathy to the world, and again, we need both. We need the ability to pick out our food, to reduce the world to something to eat, but we also need to respond to the world as something to love. And what McGilchrist argues and shows very well in his book, The Master and His Emissary, the divided mind and the making of the modern world, is that since the growth of science in the beginning of about 400 or 500 years ago, we've increasingly seen that analytic reductive part of the mind as the most important part, as the master. In fact, it's not the master. The master is the part which is capable of responding to the world in love and wonder and awe. And yet we're simplifying the world to something we can use, to something that's simply useful. We turn nature into natural resources, for example. I'll stop at that.
No, this is fantastic. Is that narrative, was that a motivator? So one of the reasons that I came on here to talk with you is because of Circles and the Cross and your book. Is this how your book emerged out of your soul, so to speak? Did it come from this narrative that, something's off and we have to rebalance? Because McGilchrist is going to talk about it's not that left is better than right or right is better than left. It's that it's unbalanced. Mm-hmm. Is this part of the motivation for your book that I hope everyone will read, by the way?
Well, actually, it's one of the reasons the book took so long, because McGilchrist wrote his book, I think, in 2013. I encountered it by a former student who was excited about it, sent it to me. And then I met McGilchrist. We had him come for lectures. And when I read the book, a lot of things became much clearer to me. And
really?
The concerns that I'd had in environmental concerns and, just the whole problem of modernity. McGilchrist's analysis helped me understand it. The book started much earlier. I'd say that the book probably begins with all of us. It begins, waking up in mystery as a child. We all have that experience. I had the privilege of growing up in a rural environment, in a farm along a river in Oregon, as a Christian. Didn't really question the Christianity, but I also had a deep sense of the wonder of the created world that I was able to wander in and experience. But I never really put the two together. As a good conservative Protestant, I guess I knew that Jesus was my Savior. But what did Jesus mean for the fruit trees, for the trilliums, for the salmon, for the river? I didn't have any resources to talk about that.
That's right.
And at the same time, I was, along with my family and most other people, busy reducing that wonderful world to natural resources. Our family were farmers and loggers. So I spent a lot of my time as a child and a teenager growing up logging, helping my father log. And it was okay to cut the trees down. We were cutting the trees down, turning them into fields. But something was wrong. And when I came away to college, I began to have a way of putting together my Christian faith and ask the question, what does Christ mean for the forests and the rivers? And in a way, I've been trying to answer that question ever since.
Right.
I taught my first teaching job was teaching literature, teaching English, but I couldn't keep away from this was back around the early 70s, beginning of the environmental movement, and so in I think 1974, my wife and I started an environmental studies program. There was a place on another island, Whidbey Island, that our college had available, and so I got a group of students together. We lived in the house together with them. And that is something I want to come back to. I think being together in a community is an enormous, and being around a table, and you understand this very well because you know the value of a restaurant.
Yes, we are doing
eating together, drinking together. Right. It's really important. But that was a setting in which, in the 70s, we did this for 3 years with the students. Until something else took us away, that I think the book really began there. In fact, I had a phone call last night from a student who is now retired. He's 72. He has 2 grandchildren. This is hard to believe because I think of him as a kid, as a student, but this is 50 years ago. He says that was the best. Those were the best years of my life. That course, and it started. That started us thinking about how how we put our faith together with our living in the created world, and how we put that together with our living with other people, other Christians. And in a sense, we've been working on that ever since. I think the book itself probably began on a sabbatical in Scotland at St. Andrews. It's been 25 or 30 years ago now, when we joined in the week before Easter. We did this highly un-Protestant thing of taking a pilgrimage, joining a group of people who were carrying a cross across the Midlands of the borderlands of England and Scotland, ending up at Lindisfarne, which was an important Christian center back in the 7th and 8th century, from which much of east of Europe was kind of re-evangelized. But that experience of carrying a cross through the countryside and realizing that this in a sense provides a center for everything around us. That, I think, is where the book really began. And I was also experiencing again the power of this symbol, the Celtic cross, it's called, which of course is a cross, but it's in the center of a circle.
Yeah.
The circle is a traditional image for everything that is, for creation. And but the cross is bigger than the circle, and it provides the center for the circle. And if you think of the cross as something, the Celtic cross as a picture of the self-giving love of God, which you see most clearly in Christ on the cross, as the center of creation, upholding creation, that it's developing that idea that I think is really the source of the book.
Well, one of the critiques, I'd love to hear what you think about this in the East, about what you're speaking of, is, and I'll do my best, but is fundamentally that the theology changed, and the theology changed with certain Catholic teachings, Aquinas, which came out of Augustine. And if you track it, as my guy Sherrard does, what you see is the triangle, which is the Trinity represented, gets flipped. And so the filioque is the idea that, right, and the Son. So the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. So in Eastern theology, in the Church, in the Orthodox East, there's no filioque, as you know. And so what Sherrard tries to expand on, which I'd love to hear what you think, and this is the critique, is that Western Christianity, basically, it removes, it takes Christ out of the triangular equation where he's down in. So God, Christ proceed, right? The Holy Spirit and Christ are together within that which is creation. And so one of the critiques is that Christ was sort of removed, and the Holy Spirit left sort of with us in some vague sort of unknown way. And that allowed for essentially for the incarnation to be forgotten over time. Now, I'm giving it a quick run. He develops it in all of his books, and starts with the rape of man and nature. And I was literally, I think as I read that early in my Orthodox conversion, that probably did more to change my view of the environment and all of these things that you mentioned. And specifically to say, wait a minute, Christ is present. And so incarnation is happening again and again and again. Christ is happening again and again and again. And so when you're in the water, it's a type of incarnation of that which water is. And of course, that's related to God. And so God is present. And of course, pantheism is where the Protestant West, and really the Catholic West, they got nervous about that. Wait a minute, God's in all these things. Yes, Christ is present. How is he present? And then you get the paradox, and then you get the miracles, and then you get the confusion in the West about what is true, and what is true is that which is materially true. And so what do you think Western theology's, quote, responsibility, I don't like that word, like they're not culpable, but some people in the East argue, look, if you don't change the theology, if you don't come back home, you can't get out of that which has been created, which is this furnace of materialism. The West's theology continues to perpetrate that. Is that resonance with you, or is that just?
Oh, it resonates a lot, and I would only fine tune it by pointing out that Augustine Aquinas line isn't the only line in Western theology either, even though it did unfortunately have the strongest voice. And one of the most important divergences from that is a Franciscan theologian, philosopher named Duns Scotus. Duns Scotus was a near contemporary of Aquinas, so a bit older, who differed from Aquinas in some very important ways. And the most important way is what Franciscan scholars today call the primacy of the incarnation.
Yeah,
that the incarnation was in God's purpose from the beginning. It's not a rescue operation to sort of save an experiment that went bad. It's there in the beginning. And so in a sense, Christ is in all things, or a better way of putting it, more biblical way of putting it, all things are in Christ.
Yes.
This is the way this is the way John puts it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, but all things are in Christ. All things were created in and through the Word. And so this is, sure, this is an Orthodox insight, but it's pre-division. It goes back to John. It goes back to before the filioque controversy. But I fully agree that Western theology with that line kind of took a wrong turn. God the Father becomes the rest of the Trinity kind of becomes almost an embarrassment.
It becomes. Well, it leads to Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, which is like, okay, listen, Jesus, you're not really wanted here. Like, here's the deal. You just confuse us. Okay. There's mammon, there's the church, and let us get on with the business of providing mammon, kind of get out of the way already. and for the Orthodox, at least for me, I'll just put it like this. For me as a convert, man, that helped me. That helped me because I was living in Africa, and, our work takes us around the world doing Peace Corps style development. And all of our guys wake up to this because what they keep seeing is Juju religion. I call it Juju religion it's a generality. It's the Mayans, the Santerias, the African, they're all practicing something like this intermingling of the spirit with material reality. And I couldn't place myself when I was a Protestant coming up as an Episcopalian. I couldn't place, I was just like dark, evil, but then it can't be like that. There has to be some continuity. And then I started to realize, this ancient Christianity speaks in that way while upholding and worshiping the incarnation of the creator of all things. And then I'm like, and then, Loren, without me stealing all this interview, here's what it really is really fascinating. Then you start to realize there is no contradiction between science and religion. Then you start to realize, I don't have to fight one against, and that was a big help for me. It's a big help.
Because the scientist is simply unfolding what God is doing in creation. Right. It's the same task. It's not, there's no tension at all. Unfortunately, I never had to fight that battle.
You did not. Is that interesting?
Yeah, okay. I just never, I didn't have any trouble with, I saw evolution as another name for what God is doing. And it's a mistake if you leave God out of it, but it describes the slow process of God's unfolding.
Can I ask a quick question about that? We can talk about anything. I'm on a bender about evolution. Do you think it can be told as an origin story for modern people and still lead us to something like peace of heart, peace of mind? Or do you think it's a narrative that we need to get rid of? And again, if you don't want to talk about this, that's fine. But I do. I just want to hear what your opinion is on
evolution the capital E, that is there are really only two big stories that you can appeal to answer the question, why is there something rather than nothing? And the first, the ancient story is that it's a creation. It's a purposeful thing. There's a person behind it, in it, through it. And that's the creator, God. The other big story is that it's an accident. It's just, as one contemporary cosmologist puts it, the universe is one of the things that happens from time to time. And we too are just one of the things that happen from time to time, which means that all of our anxieties and philosophies and everything, it's just a part of the accident. It's sort of like the pebbles on the beach. It doesn't really mean anything. And there's no, and if by evolution you mean a story that begins with that, with an explanation that's rooted in that story, well, then of course it can't provide any purpose, any meaning, any satisfaction. If by evolution you mean studying carefully this unfolding mystery that we don't, when you get to the end of any scientific description, including the so-called evolutionary description, you're still left with mystery. You're left with this gorgeous, beautiful, unnecessary world, and you find it in all kinds of ways. One of the ways we've discovered it recently is what's been called the anthropic principle, that the universe, the more we understand it, it had to be exactly the way it is. It may be just chance, but it had to be exactly this way, or we couldn't be here. And that happens up and down the line, and so you're left with mystery. You're left with a miracle.
Yeah.
So
I think just to finish this out, at least on my end, I'd love to hear more, but I don't look at whether it's true or not in the material sense. There's arguments to be made that it's not and that it is, as a theory about human origins. I'll come back to this evolution thought, and then I've got another good question on the book for you. I don't know if evolution is even materially true, true in a atheistic, materialistic sense. I don't really care, but I am interested in this. If it's true without what you beautifully said, without the first mover, like Aristotle talks about, if it's true and you don't include the creator, it can't work. It'll just end in chaos. And what we're seeing, I think it'll end in a type of societal collapse, because human beings first and foremost seek narrative. They don't seek material truth. They seek narrative truth. They want to know their story. They want to be able to tell the story about beauty and love and hope. And there is none of that there, like you said. And so for me, I don't really care if it's true. You can't keep telling it as a culture. You'll kill yourself. I literally think like that. Now, maybe it's not true, but I like hyperbole, Loren.
I completely agree. I think I'd have no trouble with the material facts of evolution. I think that's what science is telling us about what God has done and is doing. But it's meaningless without that narrative. And if you say this is just one of the things that happens from time to time, it's meaningless. It's purposeless. But if we understand it as what God is doing, then it all changes. And what God is doing becomes clearest when we look at Jesus, becomes clearest when we look at what's symbolized by the cross at the center, Jesus at the center, the self-giving love of God at the center.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
By the way, I wanted to just add one more interesting little thing. I've been involved a lot in what's called the environmental movement. And one of the most important early documents was an essay by an address, actually originally by Lynn White as historian, called "The Historic Roots of Our Ecologic Crisis," in which he argues that the Christian West, in particular, bears a huge burden of guilt for the emerging environmental problems, and he points to two exceptions. One is Franciscan. He says Francis should be named the patron saint of ecology, and he points to Eastern Orthodoxy. He says,
"Is that right?
The same kind of thing didn't happen in Orthodoxy," and the reason is what we both talked about, is that they both see the centrality of the incarnation in a way that brings God and creation together without resorting to pantheism. So what White's essay is often seen as an attack on Christianity, and he says, if we're going to solve environmental problems, we either have to create a new religion or rethink our old one. And he's writing as a Christian, actually. And this book I see as part of rethinking the old one.
Yes.
And orthodoxy is the center of that. But his Franciscan line is as well.
And this ties into the book, the artwork, which is beautiful. It's behind you guys. When you go and look at the book, we'll link this, Loren. And maybe Andrew, right now, you guys could even show the cover as we're speaking. Tell us about the cover. There's a metaphor going on, and it's really gorgeous too. And tell us about the cover of the book and what you're trying to do with it.
Well,
it'll be on the screen for folks to see. So
the cover is based on this painting that an Australian painter who came to Regent, as already an accomplished painter, did when he was a student here. And when he was here, there was an ongoing, sort of the climax, an eruption of an ongoing argument about logging in the West Coast. And so the painting shows it's a triptych, 3 images. On the left, and you'll see it on that screen. I won't show it. I can show it. It's right. Mm-hmm. It's right there. Wow. On the left is beautiful. The island that I can see out my window. In fact, I'm going to walk over there and just show it to you. Just a second.
Do it. Folks who are watching
called Retreat Island.
Loren is quite a character when it comes to wilderness and outdoor living and nature.
Can you see that? Could you see that island out there?
Oh yeah.
That's Retreat Island. It's also the image on the left of this painting, which becomes a book cover. And it's as it is now, it's covered with trees. But the center image is the same island, clear cut, logged. It's a wasteland. And that's a powerful statement. The right image is a little harder to explain. It's a lake that we had hiked to up in the mountains that reminded him of some of the desert lakes in Australia. But it's also the empty tomb. And if you look closely at it, you can actually see a hint of the bench where Christ lay. And so Lindsay was asked to do this painting at a local big mall shopping center in the week before Easter, which he did, and it's called Easter Journey, because of course the most important thing about the painting is that center clear-cut island is also the head of Christ.
Yes,
on the cross. It suggests a crown of thorns. And the horizon line is what I see is his outstretched arms as well. So the painting is in dialogue with a very famous painting by Salvador Dali called Christ of St. John of the Cross. You could probably show that as well.
Yeah, let's show that too, Corey. Let's show that.
And it's very similar. It's looking down on the crucified Christ, but the cross is suspended above creation. It's not even connected. And Lindsay gets it right. And the suffering Christ is embedded in creation. He's embracing creation. And of course, I didn't know about the book when he painted that. This was 35 years ago. Lindsay has now died, but as I've often come back to it in my thought, and then I was able to persuade the publishing company, to put this on the cover, even though it's an odd shape for a cover. And I'm so happy because it really sums up much of what I'm trying to say in the book about the relationship of Christ and creation.
So that's just magnificent storytelling. One, it's artwork, which of course is a type of telling. You have to tell. You're just using a different medium. How does our society? How do we have to become Christians? I'm not going to make fun of people, but do we have to accept this? Do we need more people to accept Jesus into their heart? For the East, that's a tough thing. It feels very intellectual, like I'm letting Jesus in now or something. How does society recapitulate or recapture the things you're talking about? Which, by the way, I don't know many people, and I know a lot of people who aren't Orthodox Christian or any Christian who would think anything crazy about what you're saying, other than the imagery there might not really be a Jesus, but it all sounds very beautiful, Loren. Thanks for the poetry. But there's nobody who's rejecting this as an angry thing, like this is dumb. But how does this stuff become real again to modern people? Is it possible, or is it not really possible?
Well, it's a great question. It's one that I've thought a lot about just recently, because just this week I finally set a date for a book launch event here on Galiano Island, which is a highly secular, neo-pagan West Coast culture.
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, and these are people I work with. I know there is one little Anglican church that we're a part of, but it's just the old folks, and it's considered completely irrelevant to the life of the island. So I'm going to show a film that a filmmaker friend of mine made 5 years ago on the book, long before it was finished, but showing a lot of these ideas, and filmed mostly on Galiano. And then I'm going to walk through the argument of the book, explain this painting. And I don't know who's going to come, because the title's got Christ in the title, and that's religious.
Yeah.
And it's got the image of the cross, and that's religious. So I don't know how many people are just going to say, okay, that's religion, it's Christianity, I don't want anything to do about it. I hope a lot of people come, and that I can begin to show the integrity of this, the fact that our story holds together.
Yes.
Around the picture of the universe as creation, not an accident, and that the clearest place we see the nature of the Creator is in Christ, is in the incarnation. And I don't know how many people are going to walk away from that, or just say it's just a weird medieval kind of thing.
I love, though, that I do think we should salt the earth. I think you should do it. You know what I'm finding? I taught for a long time before I started First Things, and now I've been blessed with the board to be able just to do this full time. I think things are changing. What I used to think was a postmodern moment with bellowing young people who are not getting it. I think those loud young people are actually getting it without the vocabulary and without the vision. I think they're rebelling against something that says that's not soulful. And they may be embracing things oddly, maybe they're not doing what I want them to do, but there's something in the rebellion that I don't think you'll get zero thumbs up from whatever you end up doing. I do think that the ground is becoming ripe or rich. The question is what emerges. Yeah. And one of my favorite guys, Jonathan Pajot, he talks about it could go a lot of ways. A God's going to emerge, though, for godless people. There's no way that they can stay in a godless conversation. It just, I like the old idea that everyone's religious. In fact, that's what human beings are by definition, that makes them not, say, a dog, is that we're religious by nature. that we set something high and then we make meaning out of everything we do according to the high thing. It's just what's the high thing for you and for me? We all have different high things. And I would argue we're all religious. The question is will people turn back to a type of Christic faith? I think you should go do the talk, Loren.
Oh, I'm planning on it. It's all set. By the way, about that word religion, and I actually say this I'm sending a mail out to every person on the island with a picture of the book cover, the blurb on the back, and then inside a little saying. I say, don't be offended, don't be scared by the religious title, because we are all religious. The word really? Religion, and I point this out, religion, the word is related to the word ligament. Religion is that which holds us together. Ligaments hold us together. You can't live without ligaments. Your body would fall apart. You can't live without religion, whatever your religion is. So I also in my book somewhere say this book is for religious people of both theist and atheist persuasions who are having trouble with their faith. Because a lot of people's Christianity doesn't seem to fit with the world they're living in either. And a lot of people's atheism doesn't fit either. They're having trouble with their faith. So this, I hope I challenge people from both sides.
That is really well said. It's also the religion part. I don't know, because I would love for you to go listen to some of our podcasts, but I have 2 podcasts on that. In fact, it's sort of how we started out with this entire podcast. So let me ask you a question about that. I think there is an old world. So I want you to hear that. You can hear it chronologically. And just a question for you. I wonder what you think. You can hear it chronologically as it's older than, say, the Enlightenment. I don't know. Take it 1600, something like that. There's a type of pre-Enlightenment people and the way that they went about the world. And then there's post-Enlightenment. And I know that's not a fair category always, but our podcast is about that, because when we go and work in Africa, what we constantly see is this old world ligament. It's recognizable. It has contours, it has shapes, it has a reality, and it's old. And the new world has its own realities. And so I wonder, first of all, does that categorization make any sense to you as I'll call you a new world Christian? That's not fair, but you have so many unique ideas. Does it category make sense? And number 2 is can they be united in something royal? And I think your book is doing that personally. I think that's why we're talking, because we have a natural affinity one for the other. But do you think, would you want to get rid of those categories, old and new? Are they not helpful to you?
Well, no, I think it's helpful, and I use different language in the book, but I talk quite a bit about the fact that the Enlightenment, and I have a whole chapter on the Enlightenment.
Yes.
And then I have a chapter on Romanticism, which is a disdained term, but it's a whole series of reactions against the Enlightenment. People saying this is not enough. There's more. There's more to being human than this reduction, and in a lot of ways, literally, the New World, America, the United States in particular, was almost a kind of proving ground for this, a way of testing Enlightenment against Romantic vision. There's an Enlightenment reduction going on, but there was also this encounter with something that with wilderness, with a wonder, with an awe, and out of that tension, I think, grew the environmental movement in the 20th century. And I've often characterized the environmental movement as an ethic in search of a religion. People know there's got to be more than the Enlightenment reduction of things. We're more than just accidents. But where do we go? The Christianity has seemed to be, that didn't seem to have the answer, partly because of the same very problems you talk about in the direction it took with Aquinas and so forth. And some people do turn to orthodoxy, turn to a more sacramental Christianity.
Yeah, right.
or they turn to neo-paganism or ecofeminism, various things. I have a whole chapter in the book called Searching for a New Religion. And I look at these sympathetically, but say they all fall short. And then the vast factor of the book is trying to develop the kind of, I guess you'd call old world Christianity that we're talking about, that does connect with what other people would dismiss as pagan or pantheist, but it does so in a thoroughly incarnational way.
That's how I feel about your work. Our friend Matthew put me onto it, and then I started. By the way, the book I would recommend for many reasons, but here's one. It's like a memoir, Loren. We learn a lot about you, and you talk. I really enjoy when the author is really right on the edge in terms of being really present in the narrative. I like that rather than a more scientific narrative. I really like when but it's that kind of book that allows us to get to know you. And when you put it down, I'm intrigued anyway. And my big intrigue comes from the fact that you're a Westerner in the Christian tradition and making sense of things that blew me away, both in your book, but also in the stuff that I've encountered in terms of sacramental life in the Orthodox Church. And so it's a really nice book for folks, and it's accessible. And so that's a good thing. What do you want us to know before we hang up? I think we talked about the things I want to talk about. You wrote a great article on the emergence of a new metaphor for Earth, the Gaia, the ideas of Gaia and Mother Earth. And there's a series of questions there about consciousness. I think we've talked about some of them. Have you read or are you interested in St. Maximus the Confessor at all as a philosopher?
I'm aware of his work. Yeah, and he caught very well the cosmic nature of Christian faith, and he's the great Orthodox cosmological thinker. I don't know
his Neoplatonism. You see it in your work. You see it.
I'm not comfortable with the Neoplatonism at all. I think that's a mistake, and I think that's a danger.
Interesting,
because, and this is where Duns Scotus also stands against actually a Platonic and Neoplatonic streak in Augustine and Aquinas, which says in effect, this is how I would put it, and we might disagree on this. The Neoplatonic way is that all things, ascend and come together in God. So that when you look, I have a colleague who's not a colleague anymore here at Regent, who's very much along these Neoplatonic Christian lines, who in one of his books says, created things have only a borrowed reality. Mm-hmm. Their reality is really God. If you trace it back, it's God. But I don't think that's biblical. I don't think it's Christian. I think when you look at a tree, as I'm looking at, I'm not looking at more of God. I'm looking at something that God has condescended to hold in being in it for itself, for what it is. And so there are a whole cluster of ideas that Duns Scotus developed. Hexietos, which means the isness of things. Yeah. Things are what they are, not because they participate in some divine reality, but because God sacrificially lets them be themselves.
Interesting.
And that's a costly decision on the part of the Creator, to let things genuinely have their own being. And this is another debatable term that people like my colleague would reject, the univocity of being, that things have a real being, like God's, in a sense. God lets them be. And so that when you look, what things, as they develop in a God-like way, don't become more of God, they become more themselves. But that's not necessarily opposing to God.
No.
So these are ideas that we could talk about more. So that's the danger, I think, in the Neoplatonism of Maximus, and runs through a number of Orthodox thinkers.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, that's the thing that many of the reformers are rejecting when they were there was an invite there in the 1500s to go and actually talk to the East. And this conversation was the one the East, at least one of the two of the patriarchs, some of the scholars from the Tübingen University, the Luther guys, were talking to the patriarchs. Yeah. And it was this conversation that eventually sort of ended the conversation, because it ended.
Well, let it not end ours.
No, right. And here we are still.
Yeah,
but I'll say that it feels like weeds. What I like about your work, and I really love about many of the writers in the East, is that there is a relationship between what feels like, philosophical weeds. We were about to get into the nature, how much God is in a tree. But it really is important because those ideas play out. In other words, as you know, seeing is not believing in Christianity. Believing is seeing. You become aware because you start in God. And so you see what is because you have faith in God. And so that thing creates the reality on some level. So it does matter what you're believing, because it will play out in material reality. I really think that's a Christian thing. Do you think that's a Christian thing? It feels Christian to me.
Oh, definitely. And it's actually, I draw quite a bit in my book on the thought of Michael Polanyi, who is a thinker, a philosopher of science, who pointed out that in both religion and science, we believe in order to understand.
That's right.
Faith comes before understanding, not the other way around. And that's true. It's true in science as it is in religion, because essentially we're exploring one world, not two. It's not a religious world and a scientific world. It's one world. There's so much more I'd like to say. Back to this idea of things having their own being. This is implicit in the very Genesis account, which is often misquoted. That refrain that comes again and again in Genesis 1 is not, and God said that it was good. It's God saw that it was good. Already acknowledging the otherness. He's not just saying it, putting a label of goodness on it. He's seeing its goodness as something in itself, for itself, and upholding that selfness. And anyway, that's a big idea.
But I think you could trace that right down to, say, like a civil right down to the Constitution. It's like, no, you're good in and of it. You have something invaluable given to you. The problem is when you try to cut it off from a creator. We know this already. And it's why we have an ecological problem. I don't know if you know Paul Kingsnorth, but this is what I'd like to do. He's become kind of a friend of the show. He was a activist and
I know his work. I read some of the things he's written and like it very much.
I think it'd be neat if you came back with him and the three of us had a talk and we just sort of mixed it up. I think he knows about you. And if we get a chance, maybe we call back in a couple months and we try to hook the three of us together. I feel like, I think it'd be a really nice talk.
No, I really responded to the path he's walked. I see it.
You can't. Clearly. He's aggressive, but he's also he's kind. I like what he's trying to do. Some of his writing is tough, but it's I think it's appropriate in our age. So let's leave it at that, and then I hope you'll be a friend of our little show, and we can talk again. And if I ever get back up, I was up there. I threw one of these dinners that we do from our restaurant called the Supra. It's a Georgian tradition from the Caucasus, from Orthodox Georgia. And we talked a little bit about it, but I threw one of those on, I think it's called Vancouver Island. Isn't there a big island there?
Yeah. Right. It's right over there.
Yeah.
Actually, you're mentioning the dinner. It's one other thing I wanted to say, and I think this is a wonderful way of bringing the Orthodox to a good conclusion. As I'm one of the great icons, as you know, Rublev's icon of the Holy Trinity. I have just a poor copy of it here. You know this
yes,
great picture. This is one of the things I love about this very rich icon is that the three figures who are, the guests, Abraham's guests in Genesis, but they're spoken of as one, and so the Orthodox have seen it as an image of the Trinity. They're responding to Abraham's hospitality, who lays food for them.
That's right.
So this is a meal. It's around a table. And the important thing is that the empty place at the table is facing us, and the very perspective of the picture has us at the vanishing point, inviting us into a bigger world through the food. And one of the ways and I talk about this in the book a bit, we began to learn about the reality of the Trinity, which is not so much about threeness, it's about community, it's about connection, it's about love. And one of the best ways of experiencing that is eating around a table, which is a plug for your restaurant. It's how we began to learn a deeper understanding of what Christian faith meant when we were eating around the table with students, and we still do that a lot.
I saw a video of you doing that. Is that part of the movie maybe that you're speaking of? I saw it online.
I think it's in the movie, yeah, a little bit of that in the movie, yeah.
I am thankful for that. I'll just let you know that tonight is a Friday, and at our restaurant in Greenville, South Carolina, if you were to get reservations, say you and your wife or friends, 3 of you came, whatever, you would come to a table that we call the community table, and you would join 17 others who don't know each other, and we begin the toasting tradition called the Supra. And people are it's so odd. In the first 3 toasts, there's 16 or so toasts. There's a toast to the spirits of the dead. There's a toast. There's a canon that the Tamada, the Toastmaster, can play, sort of like a DJ. But when it's done, Loren, what you just described in that icon is palpable, because people did not know each other. I've had people walk out of there and now they're friends. It's a very unique, and it's held in public. In other words, it's in the main part of the restaurant. So if you were to not join that table, you could still sit in the restaurant and watch. Like they're your friends. They're your neighbors doing this thing. And we took it right out of Georgia, where they still do this all the time. And we got in the New York Times. Like a lot of weird stuff's happening. The mayor, people like this thing. And I think it touches on all the things you just said and have been saying in your book, which is community.
Well, I hope I can join you in one of those meals. If not there, if you come up this way again, by all means, let me know.
Oh, we'll throw one for you. All right, brother. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you. It's been a great conversation.
And we'll try to do it again.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care. All right, guys. Hey, when you go and get this book, Circles and the Cross, I think you'll like it a lot. If you do, Dr. Wilkinson tells me not to do it on Kindle because his footnotes, which took a lot of work, aren't well framed in that setting called Kindle. But let's keep going, guys. www.first-things.org. We've got a cool little concert in Wisconsin coming up with Joe Pug and Greg Gilbertson, and we're throwing a capey there in Chippewa Falls, December 3rd. Also, 50 recurring donors. We are down to 41. 41 more. Guys, 41 more. We have 81 days to get 41 more. Bump, 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 bump. You can feel the pressure. Go become a recurring donor at First Things, www.first-things.org. Also, if any of you ever want to send something to Andrew, who makes these videos, send a note to say thank you. And maybe send him a scarf because it's cold in Argentina. He's our editor, producer, media guy. He and Corey work on this, and I'm saying thank you to them. But I'm going on and on. You're probably not even listening anymore because why are we talking about rabbits? Goodbye. Much love. Peace out.